is the first of 5 talks on nations and nationalism. It's happening in the summer of 2016, when we've seen a resurgence of nationalism in the world. That's why it's prompted me to give this talk. We've seen in Europe the passing of the Brexit vote, where England is leaving the European Union, and we've seen in the United States a major resurgence of nationalism in the America First movement for the upcoming presidential elections. I want to address this issue by looking at history, by seeing if we can find some patterns in both personalities and in the behavior of states to understand the whole concept of and ideas behind nationalism. As the French philosopher Etienne Gilson once said, history is the only laboratory we have to test the consequences of thought. Nationalism, I'm going to argue, seems to be a fairly recent idea. Indeed, like most new ideas in history, it was begun, I will argue, by a teenager. And we'll study the progress of this idea of nationalism. When I talk to my students in the past about who they are, how they identify themselves in many categories, and nationalism is usually not the first. They identify themselves as a man, as a woman, as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Jew, or as an inhabitant of a state like Texas. Nationalism seems to come relatively last. This is because I would argue that humans for a long time have identified themselves as members of families, as members of clans, of tribes, as members of cities, not so much as members of nations. Indeed, if you look into the past, there were probably great empires, but these empires treated their inhabitants as subjects, or perhaps even, like in ancient Persia, as slaves. The only possible exception might have been the Roman Empire. And this is the way things continue. With the fall of Rome, even that idea fell apart, and Europe in particular dissolved into feudal states, and broke up into people defining themselves by their cities, or at the most, their regions. And then along comes this teenage girl I talked about in 1429. Her name was Joan of Arc. And she saw herself as uniting France, which was a very strange concept, because at that time France was divided between supporters of various regional kings. The French, king based in Paris, another king based in Burgundy, and the person who had this, probably one of the strongest claims to the French throne, the King of England. And Joan united the French and defeated the English at the Battle of Orleans, and gave France its own separate identity. Of course, in payment for this, one group of French people, the Burgundians, captured her, sold her into capture of the British, and she was burnt at the stake. So that's what she got for introducing the new idea of nationalism. However, this idea continued. It spread to Spain with Ferdinand and Isabella, uniting Spain and ruling Spain, throwing out the Moors and creating a state of Spain with one language and one culture. Spain, however, didn't stop there. Through marriage and conquest, they became what we call a multinational state, conquering parts of the Netherlands today and also parts of Austria and southern Italy. So Spain became a multinational state. National states were more like England under the Tudors and Elizabeth I, 1558 to 1603. And Elizabeth I began to turn from a state supported by the nobles to states supported by a larger group of people, particularly the merchants and particularly the professionals. lawyers, and doctors. How did she get these? She used propaganda, particularly the propaganda of a brilliant young writer named William Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote a series of histories of the kings of England. These histories were designed to promote patriotism and belief of England as an identity. For example, this is from Richard II, Act 2, Scene 1. This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars, this other Eden, demi-paradise, this fortress built by nature for herself against infection in the hand of war, this happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in the silver sea, which serves it in the office of a wall, or as a moat defensive to a house, against the envy of less happier lands. This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England, and I would add, wow. That's the beginning of nationalism, and it couldn't be said better. In France, Cardinal Richelieu, who was the chief minister of Louis XIII, promoted French nationalism. As cardinal, as head of the Catholic Church, he put the interest of France over that of his church. He made an alliance with the Protestant powers against the Catholic country of Austria. And when asked why he did so, he said, raison d'etat, reason of state. The state is more important. Cardinal Richelieu promoted the idea of a centralized state. He once said, give me 6 sentences written by anyone, and I will have enough evidence to hang them. Not exactly the most charitable form of Christianity, but you can see how he built up the power of the state. Louis XIV, King of France, the Sun King, said, L'État c'est moi, I am the state. So we see how the formation of states like France, a state defined by a certain geographical area, and England, another state defined by a certain geographical area, contrasted with the multinational states like like Austria, Spain, and the state of Russia. Nonetheless, all of these states were centered on the monarchy. It was this Frenchman, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was a French philosopher, what they called a philosophe during the period of the Enlightenment, who came up with the idea of the state being the representative of the people. And this changes everything. His influence is amazing. It spreads to the new country of the United States of America, that when they write their Constitution, it begins with, we the people. It spreads to the French Revolution, 1789, with the idea liberté, égalité, fraternité, and the state representing the people now. We'll see the consequences of this in the next talk.